Yes, I'll call this meeting of September 5th. I'm going to take that back. Yeah, of the Planning Commission to order. We'll first have our roll call
Warren Oxer,
here.
David Bramer.
Here.
Ray Black,
Present.
Jenny Beverly. Here. Lisa Hammock. Jean Riddle.
Here.
David Ferguson.
Here.
Britt Copeland.
Here.
Mike Pittman.
Here. All right, we have a quorum, so we'll go on with the meeting. Minutes were sent out for our August 1st meeting. Did you have time to review those and any changes? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion approval.
Have a motion to approve, Ray seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed unanimously, opposed, I assume none. Anyone have any communications or anything they want to share with the board? I don't have anything listed on our sheet. Commissioner Bramers or anything on the commissioner side or? All right. Then we'll move on over anything for current business. We don't have anything before us tonight on that. So we've got it under new business. It's somewhat new business and old business. At our last meeting, we've discussed amendments and corrections to the UDO that we had done. And then if we have to get through that discussion, we need to have a little bit as to when to schedule a public hearing on those ordinance changes. They sent out a sheet to each of us with quite a bit of information, a packet with quite a bit of information on some of the changes, and we can start and go down through that and see. I don't think there's any need to go through any of the individual typos, edits, and errors, correct? You've been able to cover that.
Unless someone has any questions, but no.
All right, the first one that we need to have some discussion on is in our residential districts, the R1, R2, and R3, we need to talk about a 65 front yard setback compared to our old ordinance, which had a 35 foot setback. Can you elaborate on that some for us as to what you're running into?
Okay. We haven't run into it too much, but Josh and I, there was I don't know if it was a building permit. Somehow we got talking about this. It's been a little bit. And we got talking about the front yard setback, and currently it reads, which I guess I could share this screen. Oh, too much happening here. Okay, so it currently reads 35 feet or 65 feet from center of the road if the right of way is not dedicated by a written recorded document. And when we looked that up, 65 feet just sounded far when you're considering is the minimum lot area to be 0.23 acres. So we went back and looked at the old ordinance, and it just simply said the 35 feet. It didn't give any other information.
Well, you're not going to want to go, I'm asking the question. We're probably not wanting to be less than 35 feet from the right of way, correct? If there's a right of way dedicated there. And so if there wasn't, and so if you had the road and then you had utility easements on the side of the road, you know, you'd be 35 back from whatever that dedicated right of way was, correct? Or do you think we ought to be able to go closer than 35 foot back?
I don't know. I just need someone to explain to me what that, how this is gonna look. If there was 65 feet.
If it's 65 feet from the center of the road, you lose what? How many feet in the center? You're gonna lose what? 10 feet?
12.
So you're really from a property line per se, you're roughly right at 50 feet from the edge of the property back is what you're looking at. And would that be easier rather than do the 35 feet or 65, just use it from the center of the road? Is there a problem with just going with that? Now, I'm saying 65 is right, but is it easier just to go from the center of the road rather than by a right of way?
It is for me. I don't, you have to ask what Josh thinks, but
65, I mean, from the center of roads, that's the easiest way for us to pull a measurement. But the issue comes in 65 feet in the residential area. A lot of those houses are setting at about 30 feet at the most.
From the center of the road?
Yes. And you get in a lot of residential areas in a subdivision or something like that, 65 feet's a pretty good distance back. Some of those really small lots. Now, when you get out into the ag areas, the 80 feet, I think it's good. You get in a residential,
Well, refresh our memory, what are the differences? I don't have the whole book in for me, on an R1, R2 and R3,
The differences
as
of,
far as,
you can pull those up.
the size of the lot and so forth.
yeah, it's right here, the minimum lot width is 100 feet. The minimum lot area is 0.23 acres or 10,000 square feet. And then, the front yard says 35 feet or 65 feet from center of the road. The minimum side is, for primary structure is 10 feet, accessory is 5. The rear yard for primary is 15 feet, accessory structure is 5.
Well, the one thing you don't want it too short is if I don't know how long a vehicle is or a little trailer, but you want to make sure they have, if their garage is facing the road, they have plenty of access or plenty of length to be able to pull in, park without being sticking out on the road any, like some of these subdivisions in town, you can't really even get your whole vehicle, the larger SUV or pickups on that parking lot without getting into the sidewalks and everything else. I know we're not talking that, but some of these vehicles can get fairly long.
I know in some of these cases, when you're talking about some existing lots like in DuPont or Deputy, they're tiny things and that's just what we kind of ran into and yeah, I just need to have explained to me how we need to do it.
Well, they'd be somewhat different. R1, the density there, you have to have the full size acre lot, correct? What's R1?
0.23.
0.23 and R2 is the same?
R2 is minimum lot 0.23 and R3 minimum lot area. If it's a single family and two family, hold on, I did the wrong thing, lot area. Single family detached is 0.18 acres. Everything else is 0.09 acres per unit. That's a single and a two. And there's small.
So are these primarily all referring to subdivisions? To where they would actually be where they have city sewer available?
So, yeah.
These would primarily be subdivisions or where are sewer available?
Municipal sewer and water is required, that's on each R3.
All of them would have to have
They're all
municipal sewer,
yeah,
have that small lot.
yeah,
So it's not going to be an effect out on the county roads where we're breaking out. That would be a different, still the larger setbacks.
right. Mhm.
Okay.
Yes,
What would you want to drop them down to so it would work a little better in the subdivision area there? I think you make a valid point. You don't want to get too awfully short.
I was just gonna say, I don't recommend going from the center of the road, only because that would require a lot of changes throughout the UDO. The UDO defines the setbacks, it defines property lines as the edge of the road. It defines the setbacks as measured from the property lines. So throughout the UDO, it's pretty consistent that all setbacks are measured from the edge of the road, not the center of the road.
Okay.
I mean, while in principle, I think it makes sense. The problem is that the language throughout the UDO is very consistent, but it's at the edge. I just want to drop that.
Well, that's fair.
I think possibly, we could, drop both of those down 10 foot. Would that take care of your concerns, Lynette, on the lot size, as you think, and the setbacks? I think David made a valid concern. I drove through a subdivision in Hanover the other day and where they're not wide enough to have two cars side by side. They have one car that ends up sitting out in the street. And so, even at the 25, they're gonna be pushed to have one car behind another car.
What if it's to get rid of the center of the road and like Pat was saying and do 50 feet from the edge of the road?
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Well, that's gonna put them back further than what they are now. They're 35 feet now.
Well, that's from a right of way.
Well, it'd
well,
be
there's
still the same
35 feet or 65 from the right of way.
65.
from the center of the road.
Sorry,
of the-
to the road,
Right.
sorry.
Well, I was thinking the center road would be 10 or 12 feet wide.
And see, on anything new going in, you're gonna have right of way there as well. You'd really want the house setback to be from the right of way, not from the,
Not from the edge of the
not
road.
from the edge of the road, no. You'd
Okay.
want it from the a certain distance. from
Well,
the
then,
building right
yeah,
of way.
Okay, I see what you're saying then.
So if we make that change to maybe, 25 feet, gives them a little bit more, either 25 or 20. I'd say 25 would be about the least you'd wanna go. And then the other one, drop it down to 55 if they isn't a right of way.
Do we wanna leave the center of the road since,
That we would be leaving that,
Josh just pointed out, it says there, yeah.
yeah, we would just be making it, changing the 65 to 55.
but do we wanna say center of the road anymore? If the,
All the rest of them say Center Road, so I think we.
just leave
Yeah.
it? Okay,
we leave that.
all right.
And change the 35 to 25. Everyone comfortable with that? There's no need to vote on these. We'd be having a hearing and putting them into formal adoption before we went. Pat, while you're there close, the next one on our list is definition for a shooting range.
Okay.
And wanted to see what you're comfortable with. And I think you prepared this statement, didn't
I
you?
did, yeah, I think there was some discussion previously about. I think there was concern about the word infrequently in the last line. Other than that, I don't have any notes indicating that there was other substantial changes, but I know that was one of the concerns that was brought up.
The only other area I see that you're going to be, I'd ask if I was looking at it and wanting to question, I'd say, well, does that just mean the private property owner can shoot on the property, or can they have friends over that shoot on the property too? Or would it be, I like the infrequently possibly used by the private owner and their guests or invitees. How would you word that without it getting too?
I mean, the dilemma is how, anytime you use words, right, I mean, it's how.
Yeah,
broad-
it
broad can-
expands it, yeah,
how broad can that definition go?
yes.
I guess from my vantage point, do we have to define it now? Because we currently have litigation going. It makes sense to wait until litigation's over.
I don't think that the definition in this UDO will necessarily impact that litigation. Because that litigation is in the enforcement of the prior zoning ordinance. Now, to the extent that it affects the argument as to whether or not there's currently a violation, I guess somebody can try to make that.
I had similar concerns, but
I'm just
I
wondering.
didn't want to, I did not want to push it off too far down the road. I'd made the statement at the public meeting that we had on it, that we would look at it and we would deal with it. And if Pat feels that it won't hurt us in the case that's currently before us, I would assume go ahead and deal with that issue of it.
So it says that not to be operated for a profit. Now, some of these rules are getting around where they're using, charging to park, but the shooting's free or whatever. I don't want them to be able to get around the rule that we're setting up.
So what it actually says is whether publicly or privately owned and whether or not operated for profit. So
Okay, either
the
way,
definition is saying, it doesn't matter if it's operated for profit or
Okay.
not, it doesn't matter if it's publicly or privately owned, it's a shooting.
it's a shooting range, no matter how they try to spin it. Okay,
I mean, I would suggest that generally speaking, property owners have what's called accessory use for their property, meaning that you're allowed to generally use your property in the manner that it's intended to be used, including some accessory use. And that's, I mean, generally speaking, that's why, in agricultural districts, some amounts of, like, if you have, I don't know, if you have coyotes or something and you need to defend the lands by, shooting your shotgun, that's gonna be considered an accessory use. So there's going to be a general understanding that there is uses of the land and there are accessories to that. So when it comes to when we say the private property owner use, I mean, whether that means that they can allow some friends to be with them, I would generally consider that accessory. That just like, private property owner has the right to have a picnic on their property, they can have friends there to do that as well. I think that's different than like I'm a little worried, Warren, about invitees because.
I
that
am too,
seems pretty
I am
long.
too, I do not want anything that limits them from having. One or two or three or four friends over that are target practicing shooting in a practical way. Now, if they, consider that we're gonna have a group of 30 or 40 on an every other weekend basis, that's a, totally different situation than what dealing with. Then we're into an or actually, there's probably other ordinances we have that deal with assemblies and other events that
Sure.
would have to be dealt with and require permits as well, so, probably leaving it as property owner and not, enlarging it is probably as comfortable to go with it. What's thoughts on that? All right. There was a question that came up, on solar and wind, or mainly it would be in relation to this wind. We increased the setback on a, wind tower to where it was a little longer than what the height of the the tower was. Do we want to do something similar on cell towers? Is that what you were referring to on the zoning?
Yeah, someone had asked, we had an application a while back come in. For a cell tower, and it was asked what were the setbacks, and from what I could tell, it was the setbacks according to whatever zone it was being placed in. So if it was cell towers being placed in the ag district, then it was, I don't know if you consider that a primary accessory, I'd have to do some digging. But I would take that as an accessory use, but either way, the setbacks for ag is 80 feet from the center of the road. If it's considered primary, it's 20 feet from the side property and 10 from the back. If it's considered accessory, it's 5 feet from the side and 5 feet from the back. And I just had a question from an adjoining landowner, this is a few months ago, that that seemed awful close to their property line.
You have how our wind reads now accordingly.
Doesn't, I think this, I may be wrong, but I thought the city had an ordinance that it had to be at least, the setback had to be at least the height of the tower.
We did that on the wind, and we had some language that may be from a lot that has a building on it, or there's language that we have in there on the wind side of it.
I mean, that would be a minimum of setback would be the height from the height.
We actually added a little bit to that.
1.3 times the height of the
Okay.
wind power device. Yeah.
From what though? How's it read?
To the center line of any runway located on public use airport, any public use highway, street or road, any railroad easement or right of way. Those are the three conditions we put on.
Does it have any on, as far as adjoining properties?
So part two, sorry, I agree, distance of 1.3 times the height of the wind power device to the property line of any non-participating property.
I think we should make it very similar to what we did on that.
The only thing that came up, I asked that on some that came in on us on the BZA, and the difference is they're self-collapsing, the cell towers, with wind or what have you. They're not like
They aren't gonna lay over.
they're not gonna lay over, according to the engineers that we asked about that. So I don't know if that makes a difference to anybody, but that's what they told us. They're engineered. So if a windstorm comes in, they're supposed to just crumble to the ground rather than fall over like the turbines on the air. But I agree, it makes sense. And speaking on both sides, I just want to tell you what came up in one of our cell towers, but I think it does make sense to keep them consistent. Because I could see where somebody down the road could question, why do you have it for this and not that?
Well, I'm very skeptical too, that when you have cell tower that has guy wires, and that was one of the things that they had, wanted to discuss at one time, that, the setback would be less to the guy wire where it was located.
Right.
That, if a guy wire gives, so the tower is gonna collapse on itself and not lay over like anything else would. But I do think we need to get some language, if we do it, that it is measured from the base of the tower itself. Not that distance is not required for the guy wires. You know, I don't think if the guy wire is already sitting out there 50 foot, that you need another 100, the height of the tower from it.
The only thing came up with that, if we're talking about it, is that we had that on Highway 7 at the Fraser, where the guide wire was what's right on the highway. And we were determining if any structure above ground, if that had need to be inside those setbacks or not. And I don't remember what we determined on that. You remember that, Renee? I know it was a gray area.
Yeah, I don't remember because it was tabled and we went back to it. I don't know.
I think, or they moved it or something, but
They may
anyway.
have moved it.
I think we can do some work on that one language wise and get, so we're gonna wanna basically probably look at this standard setback we've had for guy wires and so forth. We have to get some language there, buildings and so forth. We'd leave those pretty much as well, but put one in on the tower itself that is the 1.3, the same we've done on the wind tower. And if everyone's comfortable with that, that's what we'll work on that language on it. Number 5, the question came up, did we want to allow 2 splits per year instead of 1?
I think if we were to split more than 1 time per year, I wouldn't go any more than 2. I know some counties do 5 and I've had a lot of, I've had a handful of questions about, why don't we allow 3 or 4? But I don't think it'd be an issue if we did 2. But if we leave it at 1, we leave it at 1, but I wouldn't go any more than 2. I think that may cause more.
Well, the main reason that in the past, and it's probably been in place now for 25 years or better, 30, that they did the 1 was to cut down on county roads being stripped out. And they had a period of time where there was quite a bit of that going on. They would, and when you break out 2, you could do 2 big parcels this year and then break both of those the next year and then break them again. And so you get up to a fairly high number fairly quick.
Yep. Minor subdivisions.
What's that without,
Minor
yes,
subdivisions.
without going through the
They
minor
didn't
stuff.
want to do that
Yes,
technically.
yes.
Yep.
And so I'm open. It's just whatever thoughts everyone has on it.
I mean, it doesn't matter to me. It's just, those are the questions that were asked of me.
I personally just like to see it stay at 1.
I would too.
All right. And what's everyone else on page board with that? All right, stay at 1. And then we need to add language, I think, to where we could do the irregular shade block in an ag district. That's pretty clear cut.
Yeah.
We just overlooked it. Then number 7, it appears, and Pat can chime in, we're going to have to pull the language on 10-year or older on house trailers, correct?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. The Indiana stat, I mean, this is they have it as the House and World Act, but the Indiana Code 36.7.212. It's pretty clear you can't base it on the age of the mobile home.
But we can have a minimum size.
Well, you can have minimum size, so you can't base it on size or age if it's in a mobile home community license, mobile home community license under 1641.27. You can't base it on age if it's in a private property. So you can still do size if it's outside the mobile.
Yeah, the age is the main, so I think we're gonna need to just take that language out of our ordinance on the age
And
side.
currently, in the ag district, we don't. The minute the size doesn't affect the ag district, the size only affects the residential areas.
Only residential.
But we still have a minimum square footage on what size house you can build in an ag area, correct? Or dwelling that you can have. So
Yes,
it would come
yes.
into play on that, correct?
Yes, but we were thinking of like a single wide home and then. with
Yeah,
18
but we
feet, but-
dropped it down low enough to where a single wide would qualify for the square foot. What's that?
I believe it's 600.
Yes,
right now.
600, yes,
so that-
so a single
Yeah.
wide would
Most
qualify.
single wides are
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
bigger than that.
Any other changes? That pretty well got them?
Those are the ones that I've been addressed with, yeah.
And anyone else know of any other changes in it, so forth?
I will say, you remember when Amy gave us some brochures to put on the website and print out and things? There's one here that talks about, what's the process for exempt subdivision, which is our survey that we allow one split per year. We need to change that. I didn't send these out, but currently it says an application is required. And you have to file a fee and all that, and we don't do that. We don't file
We can change it.
applications.
We don't
or
have
anything.
any of those
So-
brochures or instructions.
Correct.
We have need no board action for you to be able to
Right,
change.
I just
those.
wanted you to be
Okay,
aware
that's
that
fine.
that's
I appreciate
another
that.
change, yeah.
How do you want to proceed? Do you want, we have to have a hearing before we formally vote on them. Do you want us to get all of these typed up into presented form and bring back to the next board meeting just for a look? And then we'd schedule the hearing then? Or do you want to schedule a hearing now?
I think we ought to at least look what the version that's going to be to the public
All right.
before.
And then we would decide at our next meeting when we're gonna hold the hearing. Everyone comfortable with that? All right.
It doesn't have to fall under this calendar year as far as being the final pass.
We were wanting to get it done this year, but if we
Have to,
come
but-
in October and we've got our final, we should be able to hold a hearing in accordance with, instead of having to add a meeting. We could
Still.
combine it with our meeting in November and just have the hearing and then our meeting right afterwards instead of pulling
That'd be
everyone
good.
out an extra night.
That'd be good.
Might want to have it elsewhere than here, so you leave a little bit of time between BZA and meeting, so you'd have time to get there. I don't know what kind of turnout we'll have for it, probably fairly small, but. And then we'd want to get it out on the website as far as what the proposed changes are, and you have to give a certain amount of notice in the paper and so forth, so. We can work on that at our next meeting on the final schedule. Any other business for this evening? We don't have an executive sessions advertised this evening, no. If not, anyone has anything? How's it all been going? The violations on the junk and all, the commissioners, you're working with them on those now?
Trying to,
Trying
still trying to get stuff worked out.
Ironing out the process.
Any update on the property at Brooksburg where we talked about how that is zoned? Where they're doing the boat storage and so forth?
Yeah, we had a discussion on that and it appears that they're definitely not in compliance with the ordinance. And it does not appear that a special exemption or is going to work. So, and Lynette and I agreed that the rezoning would be the only thing that could potentially apply.
Right, and I did contact the property owner and explain that to him, and, he said that he would talk with his tenant and they'd try and get some things worked out and they would get back with me,
Okay,
so.
all right, thank you. If nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?